Hi, it's Alistair's Electric Scotland. This is me doing my introduction to my weekly newsletter. It's for September 7th, 2018. And I just wanted to start by mentioning that I was getting some new batteries for my camera the other day. I don't know if you can see this, but it's Eneloop, Eneloop. It's just that I was getting some new batteries, and I went to a company called Battery Boy, and they were saying that they reckon these batteries hold a charge longer than any other battery, rechargeable battery. So I thought I'd just mention that. I'm trying it out, and so far they've lasted quite well doing these videos. So if it does indeed last longer, it might be worth your while keeping your eye out for them. Okay, well, that's just a little extra for you. I'm making progress gradually with the new hosting company. I've listed in the newsletter the issues that I've identified that are not working and need to be fixed, and I'll be working on those on a kind of regular basis until we knock them all off. That includes the mailing list, I might say, because I can't get the mailing list to work, but I think that's a pathing error, and so I've got the hosting company looking at it for me. So you'll get a list of what I feel is wrong. If you spot anything else that isn't working, I'd obviously appreciate it if you'd let me know. And what else is there? Yeah, just my air conditioning's gone. Yesterday I was thinking to myself, it's getting a bit hot in here, and I went over to my air conditioning duct, and there was virtually no cold air coming out of it at all, and it got up to 84 degrees, so I've been sweltering like anything. So I've got a wee question in for you guys, saying if you happen to know of any good companies around Chatham that can fix my air conditioning or get me a new unit. Fair enough, I did talk to one company, and they said, how long have you had your air conditioning unit? And I said, at least 15 years, and it could be 20. And she said, well, actually, we reckon that air conditioning units only last about 15 years on average, so you've obviously done very well with your current one. But does that mean that the new air conditioning units are not as robust as they used to be in the old days? I don't know. But anyway, someone says it can cost up to 4,000 to get a new air conditioning unit. There's apparently another one of maybe 2,500. I don't quite know the difference, so I'm going to have to figure out what I need. So that's going to be a bit of a research done before I move ahead with this. But thankfully it seems that our really hot weather's about over, and the weather forecast from now on in is that we'll gradually get cooler, thank goodness. So if my air conditioning unit was to go, I'm pleased it's gone at the end of summer, that's for sure. We're now into fall. Okay, anyway, here's the news stories I picked for you this week. And I might add that both parliaments are back. The UK Westminster Parliament's back and the Scottish Parliament's back, so clearly we're getting a lot of stuff on Brexit and everything else going on again. Right, the first story I picked for you this week is the awakening of Macintosh's sleeping giant. It says, carefully taken apart and flat-packed, an entire room of Charles Rennie Macintosh's best work lay untouched. And apparently they're going to rebuild it in the new V&A Museum in Dundee, the one that's due to open very shortly. So that's a really interesting story, so you might enjoy having a wee read of that. The next story I picked is Muggles of the Glen. It says, where Potter fans gather in their hundreds. This one is Scotland's best fish and chip shops announced by UK competition. So Scotland's best fish and chip shops have been revealed as the shortlist for the UK Fish and Chip Shop of the Year award is announced. Quite useful to get that, because if you're coming to Scotland for a holiday, if you keep that list with you, hopefully you'll be able to take in one of those somewhere where you're having your holiday. And one that I remember myself says, Japanese garden nestling in the Ogle Hills brought back to life. It says, an historic Japanese garden destroyed by vandals in the 1960s opened to the public again. That's just actually up from my old school at Dollar Academy, and I did actually visit these gardens, and they're quite something. Tories to unveil alternative checkers plan on eve of party conference. Its ex-minister and stand up for Brexit campaigner Steve Baker has released this video urging Mrs May to chuck checkers as a Canada-style deal and a no-deal blueprint was being stress tested. To me, actually, I think the Canada deal, and obviously plus, because bearing in mind we've been a member of the EU for 40 odd years, so you think that would count for something. So I think a Canada deal and a little bit plus on top of that would be a great deal for Britain. Next story is Heriot Watt student designs a tactile tartan. I found this really interesting. It says a student has designed a tactile tartan to try to make the traditional colours and patterns more accessible to people who are blind or visually impaired. Here's my grandfather clock ticking down to 12 o'clock. All the print that's fit for news is the next story. It says sales of the National and the Sunday Herald, both a long way below 20,000, tell you that circulation does not correlate to political posture. But it's always interesting to see what's going on in the print world, because the print world is certainly under attack, that's for sure. The next story is remembering the Loch Gilly Taws. I don't know how many of you are from Scotland that's listening to this, but I said I remember getting the belt at school a few times. A few. Not that many, but I think maybe 4 times I got the belt at school. And so I do remember that. And so this is made in the Fife town by 2 families of saddlers. The Lochgelly toss was supplied to schools for just over 100 years, with it becoming the belt of choice for teachers. So a bit of reminiscing there. And similarly, the next story is Wash House culture gets fresh airing in talk of the steamy. It was where the noisy graft of the week's washing was done, and where working class women got together to share laughter, stories, and a good dose of gossip. Next there is Australia's economy storms ahead to best growth in 6 years. And then another one is David Davis may win his Canada-style Brexit deal. It says, I'm hearing from multiple sources that the only trade deal the EU lead negotiator, Michael Barnier, will countenance is Davis's cherished free trade agreement, what he called Canada Plus, rather than any version of May's checker plan. I'll be honest with you, that checker plan's dead. It was absolutely hopeless. It's been attacked from all sides. She's just stupid, that woman. She really is. I think she should go. I really do think she should go. Anyway, I guess we'll see what happens there. Scotland's income tax receipts, 560 million lower than forecast. It says income tax receipts in Scotland were 550 million lower in 2016-17 than originally forecast by the Scottish Fiscal Commission. And that's mainly because there are less high earners in Scotland than was thought. So kind of a very interesting story there. Then next one is there's good news about UK PLC if you ignore the doomsdayers. The statistics tell of a country doing unexpectedly well. And the final story I've got is German artist wins car bridge. It's German artist Michael Tavasasas, I don't know that's how you spell it, but took 3 of the top prizes in this year's Scotland's Open Chainsaw Carving Competition. I didn't even know we had a Scottish Open Chainsaw Carving Championship. So yeah, interesting. Then on to Electric Canadian. Continuing with Canada and its provinces, I've got up volume 12 this week. Dominion, Missions, Arts and Letters Part 2. I've got the Engineering Journal up for 1952 and the Mining Review for 1904. The next one I've got is In the Days of the Canada Company. Now, bearing in mind that the Canada Company, spelling error, let's correct that one there. It says the story of the settlement of the Huron Tract and the view and the social life of the period 1825 to 1850 by Robina and Kathleen McFarlane Lizards, with an introduction by G.M. Grant. The Canada Company was run by Galt, very famous Scot, of course, and who wrote many excellent books. And so it's just going through all of that. So I certainly enjoyed reading that, actually, I must confess. Canada Under British Rule was the next book I picked for you. And in fact, when you go through that book, it points out how badly Canada was run under the French before the British took over. So it's kind of interesting to compare the two. Because as you know, France ran Canada for some time until the British took over. And of course we had the Battle of Quebec, you'll know about, and so forth. But yeah, I mean, it goes to show how the British did much better at running Canada. Then another story is Mackenzie and His Voyageurs. It's By Canoe to the Arctic and the Pacific, 1789 to 93, by Arthur P. Woodcott. Again, another interesting book there. And then I've got in the Ground Party of Canada September 2018 newsletter. And I must confess, I really enjoyed reading that this time around. They're obviously making some really good progress on sort of the charity work they're doing, and I'm very impressed with what they're achieving. So that's a good read. And finally, there's a story about Conrad Black. He said, McCain's friends and family did him no honour. It's what his take is. Then on to Electric Scotland. Excursions through the Highlands and Isles of Scotland. This is 1835 and 1836. It's by the Reverend C. Lessingham Smith. Really interesting book that. And actually, one of the bits, I'll read it to you because it's quite interesting. It is, however, in the character of her mountain peasantry that Scotland may most proudly challenge competition with all the kingdoms of the world. The author speaks not here of the lowlands, where the people being congregated into cities, the great nurses of corruption as well as of civilization, differ very little from his own countrymen, and where they do differ are not always superior. Neither do the following observations extend to the most beaten part of the Highlands, in which the temptation to make a harvest of the wealthy traveller is often too great to be resisted. But in the more secluded districts, and especially near the great mountains on the extreme northwestern coast and in the distant isles, there is a simplicity and moral beauty of character among the lower orders which cannot be contemplated without an emotion of delight. A winning gentleness of manners, with a constant readiness to oblige, prevails throughout, and their honesty, which is as conspicuous as their poverty, often induces them to refuse from the stranger a remuneration which they consider exorbitant. There is not a nation in Europe among whom security of person is more absolute and undoubted, so that the traveller in these virtuous regions, finding a friend in every man he meets, cannot even dream that he is unsafe. And that's just part of the preface that I picked out for you. So a really, really interesting book there. I hope you enjoy reading that. Oh yes, Electric Scotland's community is back again. Site's now back up on the new server. I need to get the arcade working again, and so far new users can't register an account. It's to do with the CAPTCHA system, which I've got to get fixed, so I've got inquiries in about how to fix that. But anyway, at least we're up again, and I'm posting the last newsletter went up in it, full, because obviously the messages now work again, and obviously this week the newsletter will go up yet again. The next story I've got for you is the Howes of Buchan. It's being notes local, historical and antiquarian regarding the various places of interest along the route of the Buchan Railway by the late William Anderson. William Anderson was quite a character actually, so anything he writes is usually worth reading. The Royal Scots Borders, I just happened to pick this up purely by chance. I was on YouTube. It says this 1st Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland, Holyrood rehearsal. Just I added a video of the rehearsal at the link I give you, because we've got a page about them, and so you might enjoy watching them. They're getting organised to parade, the pipes are going and all that kind of stuff. And then to complement that, I've also got letters and memorials of Captain William A. Douglas. This is the 6th Battalion, the Royal Scots, with preface by the Reverend James Black, who was published in 1920. And so you can read that book at the link I give you. And then inspection of aircraft after overhaul. This is a Category B license by S.J. Norton. It's the 4th edition and published in 1940. So this is continuing our exploration of what the servicemen did. They maintained the aircraft. So I think I've got a couple more to bring you in the weeks ahead. And then I've got an interesting 2-volume one, History and Biographical Record of North and West Texas. It's by Captain B.B. Paddock. It's many Scots and Scots-Irish folk in these volumes. Because they're biographies, you can actually search the PDF files for Scotland, Scots, Scotch, all of these kind of key terms, and you'll find a whole ton of them in here. So, it says that Americans are becoming aware of the fact that they have a history is a matter of frequent observation and remark among writers and men of affairs generally. It was one of the changes in American thought considered worthy of a special note by the Honourable James Bryce on his recent visit to the country after an absence of 25 years. This keen student of American institutions thus expresses the result of his observation. Reverence for the past and a desire to maintain every sort of connection with it is a strong and growing force among uneducated people, he says. Furthermore, this is one of the hopeful signs of the times. Well it is for the nation as for the individual when its career is anchored on both sides, is descended from a study and virile ancestry, and looks forward to a not less worthy posterity, rejoices both in the memories of a splendid past and in the hopes of a brilliant future. Such a nation or individual holds true in the course of best ideals and endeavours. is in line of progress of its greater destiny. He goes on to say, in this growing reverence for the past that renders such a work as the history of North and West Texas both valuable and timely, even now many of the personalities and achievements of the country's pioneers are matters of written record only, and too often those records are scanty and insufficient and difficult of access. To gather up and piece together its historical form, and according to relative importance, these records is the purpose of this work, in the preparation of which the constant endeavour has been to make a standard, comprehensive and authentic history, which, while narrating the wonderful story of the past, describes also the present in its various aspects with such thoroughness as to make this work an historical baseline from which all subsequent civic growth and progress may be computed. It goes on further. Now, I won't read the rest of it, but basically it's just the fact that history can tell you so much, and you can learn from history, and that's why it's important for people to know it. And I really don't think today people take enough interest in history. I think of the population in general, maybe only 1% are interested in history, and that's a real shame in my view. However, I'm big in history, as you know, so I will continue to bring you a considerable quantity of historical information. And the story I have for you this week is a Crannog Centre visit. This came from the Antiquarian Society of Scotland, and it's written by Professor Adam Cumming, who's an FSA Scot. It was written in August 2018, after he'd been to the Crannog Centre at Loch Tay. And I took the opportunity to add to that short article another wee article, and also a link to a much larger article about Crannogs. Fascinating. I mean, I visited Loch Tay myself personally. Really enjoyed the visit. So there you go, that's the newsletter for this week. So I hope you enjoy it, and as always I'll put a link to the actual newsletter so you can get all the links, all these stories I told you about, and feel free to send me any comments or share the video with any friends that might be interested in the history of Scotland and the Scots and what's going on in Scotland these days. Okay, thanks for listening. I look forward to talking to you next week. Bye.